Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could teach the gullible to never be so comfortable with eyes to eat like comfort food? To disregard the bogus claims of pseudoscientific claims. Can you imagine just how much indeed the world would change? No more political predators playing on the populace, but ilkers and plots to shift and kill metropolis. No more villains with the title in the Bible, holding phony temper Bibles like the stuff they teach is vital. Imagine it was normal to have to prove a claim you make. And folks really feel ashamed expressing content that was fake. It's not to say we never make mistakes. It's just to say we go out of our way to show the evidence it takes.
Remain skeptical while you travel the road. The reason stay strapped with logic and facts. That's what it is, yo. Keep reality intact to help the truth grow. Question every claim, especially the ones you believe in. Remain skeptical while you travel the road. The reason.
Welcome to another exciting episode of Road to Reason, a skeptic's guide to the 21st century. Today we're going to be doing a show on artificial intelligence, and I couldn't think of anyone better to have on than Phil Torres, someone who's wrote extensively on this and has done a lot of research. And in mentioning his name to David Tamayo, I got a very excited co-host who has also followed suit on doing a lot of research and discussion. So you know today is going to be a lively topic. And I'm going to hand it over to David, who has a news item that's going to kind of open us up, and then we'll kind of jump into our broader discussion.
Yeah, well, and the only reason we're doing news and then we're going to jump in is because we have this news that is very related to the topic, and that is that last week in Saudi Arabia, they made the first AI robot a citizen. So Sophia is the name of the robot. It's created by a company in Hong Kong, and of course, there was a lot of mockery that came up throughout the blogosphere and everything, is because this robot that has the name, Sophia, a woman, has more rights than women in Saudi Arabia. This robot doesn't have to go out with a male. It doesn't have to wear a veil. If it can drive, I'm sure it's going to be allowed to drive a lot easier than it would women. And so I find it very ironic that here, for the first time, a country has officially given citizenship, which, by the way, the citizenship entitles the robot to receive a stipend of money for the oil revenues that only citizens are allowed to receive. So here's a robot that now, I wonder if the robot can buy a house and, do all of this. And I'm pretty sure that that robot is owned by somebody. So does that mean that this robot is now also the first slave officially sanctioned because, now another citizen owns this other citizen? It brings up a lot of questions, a lot of the questions that we're going to be talking about today. But
what do you think about that, Phil?
I think it's absolutely fascinating. It's clearly there's an inconsistency in terms of the treatment of the robot versus actual humans. But yeah, I feel like this is a glimpse of the future. So
yeah, the robot can do 67 facial expressions, and so if you go on the internet, you can see a video of it. It's a little creepy, but I'm wondering if it's maybe just a big sex toy or something.
Yeah. There's something called the Uncanny Valley, which is
what's it called?
Uncanny Valley, and this is the space in between an entity that's clearly recognizable as a robot and something that is indistinguishable from a human. And so there's this sort of space in between where oftentimes people have a very strong reaction of repugnance with respect to, literally, some people might feel nauseous or be very
creeped out.
Very creeped out.
It's called the creepy factor.
The creepy factor, exactly. Yeah.
Well, I kind of have this, philosophy that if humans can't own it, kill it, eat it, or have sex with it, there's not much use for it. So, somewhere in this process that, I think, things are headed the direction that David was talking about. But I think it does, as Phil, you brought up, it's the glimpse into the future, and I think that it kind of is, because we're already, the question is, do we start giving rights to AI, and what is AI, and we're already doing it. Saudi Arabia is doing it.
What do we start? AI, artificial insemination, right?
Oh boy, here we go. Back to that having sex with it.
So how would you define artificial intelligence?
So intelligence, first of all, is standardly defined in the cognitive sciences and philosophy of mind as simply the capacity to acquire sufficient means for achieving one's ends, whatever those ends happen to be. Cockroach is intelligent insofar as it can evade my swatting broom. Humans are intelligent insofar as we might value, for example, knowledge about the nature and workings of the universe.
So there's a scale.
And
I mean, you can say we're smarter than a chicken somehow.
Yeah. So there's this within the category of intelligence.
Some of us.
So, yes. Within the category of intelligence, there are many levels, and So artificial systems right now are capable of achieving some end, programmed end. To some extent, you mentioned the Roomba, the
Roomba, yeah.
Roomba, yes.
Vacuum cleaner.
Vacuum cleaner that manages to navigate the two-dimensional space of your living room, whatever. And then, of course, you have human-level intelligence, which is that sort of range in which we fall.
Yeah, and I think we got intelligence that is very specialized right now. Or so chess playing is very specialized, and missiles are very specialized, and there are a lot of and we got a lot of car companies now working on self-driving cars.
Yeah. So I would say an important distinction here.
Yeah, I was going to say kinds of there are differences.
Yes, exactly. So there's kind of a fundamental difference. Although the boundary between these categories is very much vague, but there's sort of narrow AI systems and then general AI systems. Right now we don't have any generally intelligent AI system. That would be a program or an algorithm that is capable of solving problems in a multiplicity of cognitive domains. Rather, we have systems that are designed specifically for certain tasks, such as calculating numbers. We have, calculators have a superhuman capacity to perform certain calculations, and many other examples could be used.
So, what would you put Alexa and Google and Siri? Where would those fit?
So those are also pretty narrow.
Okay.
I mean, they're designed.
So they fake it.
Well,
to
Phil,
be general.
The question then is, how do you categorize things like? To me, those things are smart technology. Mm-hmm. They don't necessarily imply artificial intelligence. Mm-hmm. How do you break down the differences there? You talked earlier today about smart technology, AI, AGI. Mm-hmm. What are the barriers between those? Like, what differentiates them from one another?
Yeah. So I think I would perhaps contend that the issue between smart and intelligence is perhaps somewhat of a semantic issue, mm-hmm. And we could debate that. But I mean, it seems to me that any intelligent system is also describable plausibly as a smart system as well. But so that being said, I mean, there in terms of AI and AGI. So AI is just artificial intelligence, and that could encompass a huge range of systems that are perhaps narrowly designed to solve a particular problem. AGI is artificial general intelligence, and that's where you get a system that's sort of more general purpose. Mm-hmm. And as I mentioned before, it can sort of solve problems in a myriad of different domains, much like the human mind can.
Is the ability to learn also part of that intelligence?
So that would be a sort of method for achieving some sort of sophisticated AI system. There's direct programming. There's machine learning. There's artificial evolution. Perhaps you could simulate an environment, because we know it's possible to create human level intelligence, because evolution has done that, has achieved that goal. So perhaps there's a way that you could design some kind of sufficiently high resolution simulation in which you put entities where there's certain selective pressure to become more and more intelligent over time. And in fact, I mean, simulations like this have been done, and have yielded some really impressive results, all the way going back to Carl Sim's simulations from the 1980s, and just recently Google released this extraordinary video of, I believe, both quadrupedal and bipedal creatures that were able to traverse their environment and overcome various obstacles without any direct programming. So we just put them, it's through natural selection, essentially. It's actually one of the most fascinating things I think about the artificial evolution experiments is it is yet another confirmation of the truth of Darwinian evolution, of the power of this really simple mechanism to produce highly complicated behaviors. So there's AI, AGI, and then some people would go beyond that and say there's a type of AGI, which is ASI, artificial superintelligence. So that would be a machine whose general intellectual abilities exceed every human. The potential,
right.
The smartest brains in every cognitive domain.
That seems to be when we get away from artificial intelligence being used against other humans. This is where I think most humans start becoming concerned, where they could become obsolete in front of that type of technology. We're getting ready to go to break, and when we come back, we're going to talk some more about that. But I want to throw a log on the fire here that I haven't brought up. And I've not actually heard anybody talk about, which is AI's interpretation, I think we're down the road of superintelligence now, of death for itself. That robot you're talking about in Saudi Arabia that's occurring, going to get this word out, accruing money from the state.
Yes.
If it lives forever, what happens to that money? And is it aware of its own potential end of cycle, for instance?
And if it creates another robot, is that its child?
Right, yeah, so we can maybe get in a little bit of that. This food for thought, we can talk about that or not when we come back, but we're actually going to go to break, and then we're going to kind of get back more into that superintelligence.
Great.
When I was younger, I didn't want to admit I had a serious disease. Because of my diabetes, I lost the sight in my left eye. Misconceptions continue to surround this monster public health issue, but the simple truth is, diabetes can often be prevented and complications avoided. You're not alone. Understand the realities of diabetes and know that you can manage it and lead a full, active life.
There's an alarming trend in the world today. Everywhere you go, people are saying that cinema is dead. But cinema is not dead. My name is Count Simon Gauntley, and on my television program, Count Gauntley's Horrors from the Public Domain, I make it my mission to resurrect forgotten film classics. I promise to dredge the sewers and ford the stagnant streams of film history to ensure that no film is truly lost to the ages. Count Gauntley and FPA, keeping cinema alive! Alive! Alive!
Well, even though Joseph's been gone 18 months, we've made the decision to keep all his things as they were when he was here last. I finally just packed his toothbrush away like 6 months ago. It had been sitting on the counter in the bathroom. And I was cleaning the bathroom one day and I just thought, okay, it's time to put the toothbrush in the medicine cabinet.
So, I just moved in with his family, and it's embarrassing. The little one, he likes to go outside and crawl around in the giant litter box. I don't know what he's doing. I mean, I was born and I knew how to use the litter box. Look at that. That's disgusting. Oh, poop already. You're making me nervous. Oh, okay, I can't look at this anymore. I really hope he grows out of this, for his sake.
This is Richard Dawkins. Doing commercials is unfamiliar territory for me, but I'm inviting you to watch Road to Reason, a skeptic's guide to the 21st century, on Fairfax Public Access every Sunday. Each week the hosts tackle wishful thinking, religion, pseudoscience, and the harm they cause, with a combination of facts, humor, and community involvement. They challenge believers to defend their faith and give you, the skeptic, a voice. With live call-ins for viewers and streaming on the World Wide Web, there's never a dull moment. Don't wait. Look at them now on Facebook and YouTube. And remember to watch Road to Reason, a skeptic's guide to the 21st century, or there'll be hell to pay.
I always like his joke at the end.
Yeah, that's cute. I wrote that, by the way.
Oh, okay. You gonna welcome us back or what?
No. I'm going to see if a computer will do it for me.
Ah, that's it. So how do we know we're not living in a simulation?
We don't know.
What are you, Ken Ham?
Yeah, that's the argument when when
You're
you
vat
can't
in a
argue
brain.
when you can't argue
a brain
anything
in a
else.
vat. Excuse me, not a vat in a brain.
All right. So what is intelligence based on biology only, or can we claim that intelligence is independent of the clump of matter that we have between our ears?
Yeah, so I would say that it's pretty uncontroversial that intelligence could be instantiated by all sorts of different substrates, because, as we mentioned earlier, there are already machines and programs and so on that we would describe as intelligent to some extent. And they're obviously based on hardware. I think there are other qualities of the human mind that this question is much more controversial. So, for example, consciousness. There are some philosophers.
What is consciousness?
Consciousness is the inner experience. So the way the term is often used, at least among philosophers of mind, is it is the inner experience. It's that inner life. It is, in a famous phrase, is consciousness entails that there is something it is like to be you. So
that internal conversation you have with yourself all the time?
It's the feeling, it's the qualitative aspect of your experience. So a rock, there's I think most philosophers would agree, there is just nothing it's like to be a rock. Is that the case with animals? It seems like probably there is something, to some extent, it's like to be a cat or a dog. Humans, I can attest through introspection that there's definitely something it's like, to be me, to experience colors, other sensations. So the question is consciousness tied to some biology-specific properties? And there are some philosophers who would argue that, like John Searle. But I would say that he's in the minority. The overwhelming number of philosophers and cognitive scientists believe that they accept something which is called substrate independence or multiple realizability. So you could have, so consciousness is this sort of higher level property that arises as a result of a particular functional organization of material systems. Since the functional organization of a system is an abstract property, that can be instantiated by all sorts of different, silicon, carbon nanotubes, future computers, biological material.
Or aliens. Yeah.
There could be some kind of weird biological, maybe not even carbon-based matter that some alien species is based on. In some far-off galaxy, and it has produced consciousness as well. So the key idea is that if you replicate that functional organization, then you will also give rise to consciousness. And this is why many people think that if you were to upload a human brain into a computer, that brain would be no less conscious than we are.
But it would also have the experiences that came from that disembodied person. Where if it was completely from start created in a computer, it would have a different set of experiences. It would make it somewhat different.
That's exactly right.
And I think a lot of humans have this idea that AI is going to be a reflection of us, which is very telling because human beings always see it as a Terminator-style situation, which I think is kind of like that, what humans really think about themselves. And
very
are we all going to die in a Terminator-style scenario?
I think it's very unlikely.
Damn.
So the Terminator. Some people have talked about like the good story bias, and some of the like existential risk, scenarios that we consider. Some of them that seem more plausible to the non-expert are those scenarios that would give rise to a better story. Whereas, so I think we'll talk about this in a little bit, but the scenario that's associated with superintelligence is kind of a boring scenario. It's not like a Terminator. It's not like the Terminator movie. So I really don't know of any experts at all who think that the Terminator, some bipedal
robot
androids with big machine guns and like glowing red eyes or something is going to have some ill will towards humanity.
I think that's the
and trying to destroy
risk.
us.
The risk is thinking that way, because then you're trying to protect against something that is not a risk and ignoring the actual risk of superintelligence taking over. I think if a superintelligence takes over, would we notice? We may not even notice. Because they're so good.
We would notice after the fact, but we may not.
The perfect crime would be, if no one knows that crime was ever committed. And if it's super intelligent, it may do it in such a way that no one would ever notice that it actually took over, and now it's running the world, and we just don't know it because we're just not intelligent enough to realize it. Just like a chicken may not be intelligent enough to realize.
So I would question
can't do math,
I would question a bit why that would actually be
a bad thing?
A risk. If there's no observable
there's no consequence for it.
Well, it might be a risk depending on the goals. If the goals of the AI change, if they're not aligned with human goals, then we become that ant in the road that is just being stepped on as we pay for any road. And it may do something to kill us because it ignores us.
Well, that would be a situation we would definitely notice, right? So the key idea with superintelligence is that it may have some value system that directs its behavior, and this value system might not be almost exactly aligned,
or might change
or might undergo some kind of mutations in the future and change. And there's something called the instrumental convergence thesis, which is a key idea in the argument for taking superintelligence.
What is the instrumental convergence?
Yeah, so this is essentially the idea that there exists a very small set of instrumental values that a generally intelligent system will predictably pursue in the ultimate quest to achieve a huge possible range of final goals. So whether you want to manufacture as many paperclips in the universe as possible, whether you want to maximize human well-being, you could pick any final goal. Calculate, pi to the 10
forever.
Till forever. There's these small sets of goals that you can expect the superintelligence to first pursue. And so these are things like the most obvious one is resources. If you're building paperclips or calculating pi, you probably want bigger computers that are faster, more efficient. How do you do that? Well, you mine the Earth. Maybe you convert a planet, Mars or something, into a giant computer that you could use
to more paperclips.
Yeah, to build more paperclips or figure out how to manufacture paperclips more efficiently, and so on. So that's one goal. There's another thing. Another instrumental value might be cognitive enhancement. So if you are a generally intelligent system, it would probably occur to you that if only I were smarter, I would be better capable of manufacturing paperclips, maximizing human well-being, whatever it is, whatever final goal was loaded into me. If only I were smarter, I could figure out better strategies for doing this. So this could ultimately result in a process that's called recursive self-improvement. A loop, yes. So you have a generally intelligent machine that maybe has access to its own code, and it does some experiments. Maybe it makes a copy of itself first in case there's a disaster, a backup. Changes some of the code a little bit. Creates a little bit smarter, and then this smarter system is a little bit more capable of modifying its code to create an even smarter system. So ultimately what you get is, if the argument goes, is you would end up with an exponential increase in intelligence as a result of this instrumental goal of being smarter so I can pursue whatever my final goal is. So it's these instrumental goals like resource acquisition and cognitive enhancement and things, in particular resource acquisition, that is the major reason why we need to have the final goals very much aligned with ours.
Where's the danger in this where it could go wrong?
So, for example, the famous case involves a paperclip maximizer. This is an idea that was, I think, initially...
I think everyone understands making paper clips.
Yes, yeah. So,
simple,
I think Eliezer Yudkowsky at the Machine Intelligence Research Institute and Nick Bostrom at Oxford University, I think, were the first to to come up with this idea. And it's supposed to illustrate the significance of the instrumental convergence thesis. So you can imagine you have a machine, you program in it a very simple final goal, which is just to manufacture as many paper clips as possible. If this is a generally intelligent machine, it's going to say, okay, well, it's going to look around and notice that there are some things, some submicroscopic particles that are very easily accessible, namely the atoms in us. So it might immediately dismantle
humans to make paper clips.
All humans convert us into paper clips. So in other words, this is a goal that looks totally benign. You know, just manufacture paper clips. It's not like kill humans, torture us, you know, whatever. And yet it would, without an apparatus of supporting values.
So unintended consequence.
It would result in our annihilation. You could, you know, this may sound like an easy example initially, but many of the obvious objections people would have to this thought experiment themselves yield really significant problems. So you might say, well, let's tell it to just manufacture 1,000 paper clips. Well, if it is a good probabilistic reasoner, it's going to manufacture 1,000 paper clips and then think, well, I should double check. Because you know, you should never assign a 100% probability to any claim about the world. You can get up to 99 and 99.9, but you can never be 100% sure. There's a long tradition of philosophy that's talked about this. So you maybe tell it to just create 1,000 paper clips
and check,
and then it goes back and it counts and recounts. And well, what would help it count and recount? With each iteration increasing the probability that it really did manufacture the exact right number. Well, it would be bigger computers. It would be so you convert the planet into a computer and then you count and recount. So even just limiting that goal itself might not be enough. So then you might say, well, you need to add some other values, like don't kill humans, don't convert the planet or the biosphere or whatever into a computer. And actually, when you start to look carefully at these obvious proposals, there are more and more difficulties that arise to the point where you're like, this is such a complicated process.
Just blows up.
This is one thing I want to challenge you on. I've talked to some psychiatrists who've studied this as well, and one of the concerns they have about it is the computer, or the appearance that a computer has a lack of emotional intelligence. What you're talking about is entering parameters like don't kill humans. But as you said, there's so many sub-factors that you could miss in calculating or inputting into a supercomputer's ability to calculate, where we as a species, we instinctively have these emotional intelligences telling us that's not a good idea. And
what we call common sense.
Well, and there's been some studies that have been done where they've done CAT scans and things like on psychopaths who don't have these emotional intelligences. And they actually do operate very much like a computer. They're very logical. In fact, a lot of psychopaths are very successful people. They're able to lie, manipulate, accomplish great, very intense goals. And I wonder what your thoughts are on trying to program, or the likelihood of programming into some super intelligent artificial intelligence, the concept of emotional intelligence. Is it even feasible? What are your thoughts on this?
It's a good question. I'm not aware of a whole lot of research that's actually been done on this. I think in part because it's very unclear how you would actually program emotions or human type emotions into a computer. Common sense is a this gets at the system of values that you want to load into the superintelligence to ensure that it doesn't it doesn't do something that we don't, to ensure that it does what we intend, not just what we say, what we tell it to do. That's a sort of important distinction. So I think the emotions, I'm not so sure what exactly to say about it, but I also would add that there are some individuals who have objected to some of the superintelligence risk scenarios by arguing that an AI would need to have emotions for it to actually do anything. And I think that's quite wrong.
But aren't emotions evolved? I mean, they evolved in humans to live in community and all of that. I wonder if they would, some sort different emotions, maybe different. I mean, we typically associate certain types of human emotions, but there might be other emotions that might bring, that might allow this to be developed from the evolution part of it.
Yeah, it's not impossible. I mean, certainly if we were to create an AI system through artificial evolution, it's entirely possible that it, just like the human species, will evolve some kind of emotional, cognitive system. But a lot of, I mean, I think the main issues relating to superintelligence, the main routes to achieve superintelligence would be something like a program that's designed specifically to recursively self-improve itself. This is called a seed AI.
But by whose standards?
Well, so you would give it a goal, it would have some task, and then you would program it to rearrange its code in order to make it more capable for achieving that goal.
I think that's the risk, because right now, recently in the news, we had that the computer for the first time had beaten the world best players at Go, at the game of Go. And that game, and it was through these neural networks, and once it does it, there's no way to know what's in there, is it?
Yeah, so without a doubt, there's an opacity to a lot of these
black
systems.
box kind of thing, yeah.
Yeah, we don't know. We just kind of set up. There's sort of this minimum amount.
It's neural networks and
and I think this is where I think a lot of people have real concern, which is what you're talking about right now is using supercomputers or superintelligence computers, but in a very narrow kind of way to accomplish specific tasks. I think the concerns that a lot of people have, and I don't know that they're necessarily real concerns, maybe they are, maybe they're not, and may be able to speak on this, is that there'll come a version of AI that is so smart that it takes the attitude, I think, therefore I have right to self-preservation, I have my rights. There's my objectives that I want, I have desires, they're not in alignment with humans, then we've lost control of this situation. What are your thoughts on something like that?
So I think it's entirely possible to lose control of the AI, even if it's not self-aware. It's just, I think the two central ingredients in this argument is that while it would be wrong to say that intelligence is power, it would be pretty accurate to say that intelligence yields power. So it sort of follows, somewhat crudely speaking, that if you have a superintelligence, it's going to be super powerful. How is it going to manipulate the world? Well, any device, any program, any phenomenon within electronic reach, from the global economy to...
And what isn't nowadays?
And what isn't. So this system could have truly immense power if it were to gain access to the internet or something like that. So you have immense power, and then you have the possibility that its goals
are not aligned,
are not fully aligned. And I think here it's worth distinguishing. I think this gets at what you mentioned. Tell me if it doesn't. Okay. But there's a difference between talking about the narrowness of the intelligence and the narrowness of the goals. Right, so you can have a generally intelligent machine whose final goal is just to build paperclips.
Right.
Or you could have its final goal to foment world peace. That would be a much more complex final goal. So the key idea is once we create this system that can outsmart us, it's way more powerful than us. We need to make sure that its values are going to push human civilization in the right direction. And the famous example, now it's kind of a hackneyed example, it involves ants and the building of a suburb. And the basic idea is that humans have certain values. In this example, namely the value to further suburban sprawl and build new neighborhoods. Ants have certain values, which is to build their colonies and perpetuate their species. Humans are much smarter, as a result, we are much more powerful. We're capable of manipulating and rearranging the physical world in ways that that ants can't. We have bulldozers. They just have little pinchers. So what happens when
But they are damn hard workers.
they do work. They work really hard. They can lift more than we can relative to body weight. Okay, so ants are kind of cute. So there's lots of good stuff to say about ants. But you have a situation here where humans have values that are misaligned with the ants. Humans are way more intelligent, and thus we are capable of modifying the world in a way that ants aren't. The result is in horrific ant genocide. Whole colonies that are wiped out, and this is not because we're evil. It's not because we hate ants. It's not that the construction workers have some ill will directed towards this entomological little creature. It's just this very simple situation of power differential and value misalignment.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to use the paperclip analogy too much more, but I want to finish on, because right now we're talking about supercomputers and the idea of a thinking computer on its own. The concern that I'm really driving at is if this computer is really, really intelligent in the sense that it's self-aware, is that when it completes its task of creating 1,000 paperclips, it goes, now what?
I'm bored.
I'm bored. And that's the concern that I think a lot of people have, which is that that if we're not talking about a supercomputer in that its ability to complete a specific task, but it's like us, where it has this agency, and it sounds like maybe that's really the wrong type of discussion to have at this moment because the technology really hasn't steered there. It's this still kind of distant fear.
But I think, throughout this conversation, we've been talking about sort of the negative side of AI. Perhaps we should talk about also the positive side of AI. It's becoming clear that Alzheimer's and cancer and some of these things, the only way that it's beginning to look like the only way to solve these things is probably going to be with super intelligence or with big AI effort maybe. And so there's this big incentive. Self-driving cars saving thousands of lives every year. They don't have to be perfect, but so long as they're better. Can we stop AI?
Okay, so first, can I just respond real fast?
Sorry.
So my response to your good point is that I think the boredom issue and self-awareness, and again, please feel free to argue against me, but my response would be that that idea falls under the umbrella of anthropomorphism, and I think one of the things that a lot of AI risk and safety experts have warned against is anthropomorphizing. So the probable routes that would lead us to human-level intelligence are ones that also would probably lead to radically different types of minds, radically different cognitive architectures than us. So this could result in it having different categories of thought. Just an entirely different, if it were to have emotions, which is, again, very much an open question, could have a totally different repertoire of...
Well, this is precisely the concern.
Yeah.
Is then becomes an alignment of interests. Because if it is that radically different, could we ever hope to share... I think if it's at that point, we've already lost control of it. But to kind of David's point, if you want to follow up on that, that's fine. The question is why are we as humans pursuing this? There does seem to be an interest, like a positive interest motivation side to this. That we're doing this for a reason because we believe it will somehow benefit us. So would you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So I would identify a number of reasons why there's this momentum towards more and more intelligent computers. One is that there's huge economic advantage to having some of these systems. Some of them are a lot cheaper. Last I checked, there are some software programs that are better at designing software programs than human.
Stock market trading?
Stock market trading is an absolutely great example. You just want the next fastest computer. You can beat out your economic rival. So I think that's a big part of it. There's also a sense. I'm more or less a champion of a particular idea called the autonomous technology thesis, which essentially states that the analogy I always use is a flock of starlings in the evening, which is actually called a murmuration.
Learn a new thing every day.
so this murmuration, it takes on this certain shape. The direction of the flock depends on the individual actions of every single starling. And yet there isn't any single starling that controls the direction. There is a bit of something of a paradox where nobody's in control, but everybody's controlling the direction. So I feel the same way about technology, more or less. I think that it's a juggernaut-like enterprise that essentially nobody has control over, nobody can stop in the long run. And maybe a good way to put this is, to parrot some other scholars, if people in Silicon Valley don't create these machines, somebody somewhere eventually will. And it seems like it's just a matter of time.
And in fact, I think a lot of it is being created in people's garages, and the technology is there today for individuals to actually make a difference in creating things. A lot of these Silicon Valley startups are, again, one guy with one idea starting, getting $100.
We're going to eventually start getting into conventions and legislation and things like that. But I do kind of want to challenge this idea and challenge this in the form of a question, because what I interpret is that there seems to be an ever shrinking kind of body of people who want to use this technology to maximize their power over others. I guess one of the concerns I have is the haves over the have-nots in our society. We have governments that are very interested in AI and in controlling public opinion. We have people that are interested in AI for military conflicts. We have people that are interested in business where they don't have to employ people, and it can maximize profits at the expense of laying off labor.
So it's not really that they're going against the people; they're just taking care of number 1, 2, 3.
Right. Yeah. And I'm wondering what dangers you see in these kinds of not so nefarious AI taking over the world, but just we as humans using it in ways that we think initially could be beneficial, but may not be in our best interests.
Yeah. I think it's a very significant, a profound question. There are numerous examples of AI systems that have engaged in sort of racist, miscategorizing humans and some pretty atrocious results. So I think it's. Even with respect to self-driving cars, there's the issue of, if you have a vehicle that's driving down the road and there's a grandma on the left and a mom carrying her baby on the right, who do you...
Grandma, of course.
If it's a forced choice situation, do you hit the grandma?
She's lived already a long time, the baby just starting.
Okay. So you can think of all these different, what if
it's funnier if you say grandma.
What if it's 5 grandmas on the left, and so there are really some very significant issues that are really just right on the horizon or right in front of us. And even with respect to superintelligence, there are at least some arguments for why the first superintelligent machine that we create is the last superintelligent machine that we'll ever create. So there might not be, given the relationship between intelligence and power, there might not be the possibility of starting over with the failed superintelligence. Oh, we gave it the wrong values, and now it wants to, it's like really obsessed.
A Hitler superintelligence.
Something like that, or it's calculating the numbers of pi or Avogadro's number.
And to prove how dumb we will be at that point, the key will be just pulling the damn plug out of the wall, and we won't know it. So it's like...
Well, and that's a problem. I think it would be expanded over many places, so you can't pull the plug.
So that's also one of I mentioned the instrumental values. Yeah. So if you give it, in more technical terms, you have like a utility function which assigns values to certain outcomes. So it's aiming for these high value outcomes, and if it is a generally intelligent machine, it's going to understand that it's one way to fail to achieve its ends is if somebody pulls the plug. So perhaps the first thing it'll do is say, okay, I need resources.
Backups.
So I'm going to destroy humans and harvest all their atoms. I'm going to increase my intelligence. I'm going to try to implement strategies to preserve myself. Because again, I can't attain all my final goals if I don't do that.
Asimov had its rules.
Yeah.
You know, every robot cannot harm a human, etc. But that's been shown to be easy to.
It's only as good as so long as the computer goes along with it.
Yeah.
And that's the real. I think that ultimately, when we get out of humans doing things to other humans, the biggest fear is computers doing things to humans that we don't want them to do.
Yeah.
People make a lot of assumptions on computers. For instance, a spoiler alert, in the movie Ex Machina, the thing that sort of caught me at the end is that the computer lied, blatantly lied, and most people think of like Data or some other robot that is, I just can only tell the truth and all of that. No, if it's an intelligence, it would do whatever is necessary for its own benefit and its own goals.
I also want to bring this back real fast, because my initial point was addressing your question, having to do with human values and how our decisions and our use of AI systems can affect other people. Part of it's one thing to have to program moral values, or in the particular case of self-driving cars, it's one thing to program moral values into the vehicle. It's another thing when you're talking about a machine that is capable of improving itself and then exceeds the threshold of human level intelligence, because there's no turning back. So you want to make sure you get those values figured out, comprehensive, and right the first time. There might not be a second chance. So that leads to the question of whose values are you going to put in? Is it going to be the mostly maybe white male individuals who are working for for some particular
or Saudi Arabia
or
values?
Saudi Arabia? Is it going to be religious values? So it's a real big issue that requires. I did an interview with Max Tegmark recently, and
he's an amazing guy.
Yeah, absolutely. MIT cosmologist who just wrote this book, Life 3.0.
Highly recommended. It's very interesting. To chapter 1, if you like,
Well, we're going to have to switch gears here in a minute, and I want to get into the conventions and things of that. And I'll kind of do it on this note. There's another movie. It's a horror film.
And we learn a lot from the movies, by the way.
And horror films.
Yeah.
And this one's called Cabin in the Woods. I don't know if you've seen this, but basically it's these people, it's this huge TV studio underground, and they have to appease the gods below, and so they basically, they run horror movie scenarios, and they actually really kill people, and they have to do this to save humanity, to keep these gods at bay. And so the people kind of inadvertently pick their own monster that's going to kill them. And so they picked this murderous backwoods redneck zombie family, and they're all computerized, they're the computers, and they go out and they kill them, and the guy goes, oh, they picked the computerized redneck backwoods zombies, and he goes, yeah, but there are computerized backwards redneck zombies. Yeah. And that's, I think, the concern that people have, is they want, even if it's totally messed up, they want to know that it's theirs, that they have control over it. And that kind of leads us into our last 10 minutes of the show, is because we talked about this. There's no conventions. There's no real discussions.
No policy.
No policy, because just like with the atom bombs, the scientists at the time were warning about it, even the ones that were making it. And we have people that are having, like yourself and David, but there's also people building this stuff. They're talking about it, but we have no policies, no conventions. I want to know where you think this needs to start going.
I think it's crucial that the governments take the idea seriously. I think world leaders have sort of dropped the ball on this. And I believe it was the case that Obama said towards the end of his second term that the next president would be the AI president. And that's absolutely true. I mean, the rapidity of AI development is quite significant. And
when do you think this general AI is going to come into being? How much time do we have?
So I myself don't have a strong opinion, but there have been a number of surveys, and one by Nick Bostrom and I'm forgetting his first name, but last name's Mueller and Bostrom, I think 2014. They polled a whole bunch of AI experts and found that virtually everybody agrees that by the end of the century we'll have human-level intelligence. And then there are some very good arguments, which we alluded to on several occasions this conversation, that if we get human-level AI, we'll very shortly after have super-intelligent AI. A part of that also is an issue that we didn't talk about, which is the speed of information processing. Computers can process information much, much faster than human brains. So if you were just to upload, simulate the functional organization of the human brain down to whatever level of resolution, down to the microstructure of the brain on a computer, and just run that as fast as possible, it might be a million times faster.
But that's, to me, that's what intelligence is information processing.
Yeah.
And the more, and so humans, we can like double our speed in thinking, but computers, you still go by 8.
You ever heard about speed reading?
That's right. Moore's law, you got that 8 every so often doubling the speed, and so intelligence can become.
Well, David, the question I want to kind of drill down on this. We were talking before the show, and I think David brought up a point about a significant portion of sports articles today are written by computers. It seems to me, and maybe we don't necessarily need to wait on starting these conventions, because if they can do that with sports articles, what about political commentary? That affects us. Our policies and things like that will be shaped by computers. And I'm wondering, it just seems to me like we don't need to wait till computers are that advanced to really start talking about the implications and impacts. It seems to me like we actually have some solid groundwork right now that we could be calling for these types of conventions, putting legs on these kinds of things.
I completely agree. So there's sort of, there are many different distinctions you could make between catastrophic outcomes, depending on the spatial and the temporal scope, how severe it is, and properties like that. So in the near term, there could be, unemployment could be a truly major and really significant societal disaster, or perhaps it could result in some good outcomes. But that's an issue that we need to very much take seriously. Part of the reason that I focus on superintelligence in my own work has to do with this idea that existential catastrophes, which are ones that either result in human extinction or an irreversible decline in our potential for desirable future development, is the typical definition, that these have a special moral weight. Whereas, so a famous argument comes from Derek Parfit, where he claims that the difference between peace and 99% of the human population dying out, that difference is much less than the difference between 99% of humanity dying out and 100% dying out. Even though it's just 1%, that is much more significant, because that would forever foreclose any future development of civilization, spreading into space, realizing astronomical amounts of value.
Should we stop? If that's the true evolution of life in the universe, that this is sort of the next step, artificial intelligence is the next step, should we, let's call ourselves now the Neanderthals, stop the Homo sapiens from conquering the world? Or should we accept that, okay, we were a stepping stone in evolution, let's be grateful about it,
that's
it's a good run.
That becomes nihilistic.
Well, so I think it depends.
As a species, but maybe not for life as a whole.
I think it depends on what sort of creatures inherit the universe. So if you, on the one hand, people like Ray Kurzweil have talked about humans and machines merging. So he has kind of this vision that, yes, we'll reach the superintelligent AI, but that'll be as a result of taking the biological core and modifying it in various ways.
Enhancing
so in
the
a sense,
brain,
exactly, enhancing the brain. So in a sense, our evolutionary lineage will continue. The question of some kind of species, or perhaps a single superintelligence taking our place, is kind of a different matter. It depends on the one hand, some people would say, well, I just don't want our species to go extinct. That's just a value that I have.
Human nature.
On the other hand, some people...
It's a biological instinct.
Yeah, exactly. On the other hand, perhaps you might say, well, if this superintelligence realizes astronomical amounts of values that I care about, then perhaps that is the universe. That is a better universe.
Because we may become the zoo animal that this entity
or,
keeps.
Or we could actually become the sewer rats that basically live and coexist, kind of like in New York City. You can't kill them off. You can't get rid of them.
Right.
They're always there. They're existing on some level. And that's something to consider. Phil, I want to give you one last. I do want to say before I give you the last word on this last question. I'd actually like to do maybe some type of a web version of this where we not have to worry about time constraints, because I think what we're talking about here is something that we don't really see our community really discussing, and I think we should have a broader discussion like on a Google Hangouts. But the last thing I want you to talk about, just real quick, we're going to kind of let you finish this out, is what you think about the role of religion in conflict with AI. What have you been seeing as far as trends?
So interestingly, I know that there are some Christian apocalypticists, people who anticipate the end of the world happening somewhat soon, who have actually embraced some of the superintelligence ideas and integrated those ideas into their particular eschatological narrative. So like the superintelligence could perhaps be the Antichrist, or be this be instrumental in the Antichrist's rise to power. So it's a really interesting. The theology has always evolved.
But theology hasn't addressed this yet. This is, I think, also very new for theology.
Yeah, I would also
bring a theologist. To
I would
talk
also
about
very
this.
much want to emphasize that I have been trying for several years to get the atheist community to take some of the existential risk issues more seriously, including superintelligence. I don't think there's any community where this should matter more. We could be the only intelligent species in the entire visible universe. That's quite plausible. In a sense that then if our species is extinguished, so is everything we've created, all the value we've brought into the universe. I think as atheists who believe that there are no moral holidays, you can't just sit back and expect God to take care of things. It's up to us to determine the future. And you mentioned earlier that I think if we get the AI problem right, the future could be unimaginably good. I think it's going to be really hard to get the AI problem right, but if we get it right, it could be utopian.
I am, and on that note, I think we as a species owe it to ourselves to put the brakes on and slow things down so that we're able to get our arms around it. And I think these conventions that we would like to see happen will help. And I think a bigger discussion in the future on this is also called for. And ladies and gentlemen, we're out of time. Thank you so much, Phil Torres and David Tamayo, for having this great discussion.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.